solving absolute value inequalities. Solving absolute value inequalities, the inequalities have their own set of rules. So let's look at less than or equal to. If you have absolute value of some expression u, it could be like x plus 5, 2x minus 1, or whatever. Absolute value of u is less than some positive constant a. Or if you have absolute value of u less than or equal to a positive a, this is how you break down the absolute value inequality. You put the u in the middle, whatever that expression is. Write down your less than or equal to sign twice. And then what goes on each end is the positive and negative of your given constant. So you'll have a three-part inequality to solve. Graph and also express your answer as in what's called interval notation. So let's start with this first example. This first example, we have absolute value of x is less than 9. If it's absolute value less than a positive number, then you break this down into a three-part inequality. So we have our less than symbol, x is in the middle, and then what goes on each end is negative 9 and positive 9. If you have strictly less than or strictly greater than, then you'll use parentheses when graphing your solution. If you have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, then you use brackets to include those endpoints. So let's put negative 9 and positive 9 on our number line. We'll need parentheses at both endpoints. And because x is in between our numbers, then that's where your solution or shading goes. So we will shade everything in between negative 9 and positive 9. Now, the last step is to express our graph in interval notation. So it's the same as what's on your number line, same parentheses and same numbers. So this is your answer in interval notation. Let's look at another example. And by the way, again, these notes and examples are part of the OpenStax project, courtesy of the good people at Rice University. Let's look at the next problem. We have absolute value of 4x minus 5 is less than or equal to positive 3. And we need to graph the solution and write the solution in interval notation. Well, because it's absolute value less than or equal to a positive number, this is how we break it down according to right here. So it'll be a three-part inequality. 4x minus 5 goes in the middle. And what goes on each end is negative 3 and positive 3. Now, to solve a three-part inequality, you solve it the same way you would a regular linear inequality. We need to add 5 to get the 4x by itself. So we'll add 5 to all three parts of our inequality. So that leaves us with 2 is less than or equal to 4x is less than or equal to 8. The last step to get x by itself, just divide each part by 4. Now right here, 2 over 4, go ahead and reduce that to 1/2, is less than or equal to x. The 4's cancel, and 4 can go into 8 2 times. Now let's graph this interval on our number line. We have 1/2 and +2. Because we have less than or equal to, we will need brackets for both numbers. And because x is in between our numbers, that's where the solution or shading goes as well. So we'll shade everything in between 1/2 and 2. Now, our answer as an interval, it's very easy to get our answer in interval form because you just take what was on your number line. It's the exact same symbols, same numbers, and same order. What if you had absolute value greater than or equal to a positive number? Let's look at the rules and some examples with that type of inequality. All right, here are the rules. Here's the rule for if you have absolute value of your expression greater than or equal to positive a. This is the breakdown. And you'll have 2 distinct linear inequalities. You'll have your expression greater than or equal to positive a. You have to put the keyword or. And then your second inequality, linear inequality, is your expression u less than or equal to negative a. All right, so let's look at this first problem under try it. We have absolute value of 4x minus 3 is greater than or equal to positive 5. Because it's greater than or equal to a positive number, this is how we break it down. Looking back down here, this is the rule that we'll be using. So we have 4x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 5. Pretty much same as an absolute value equation, where your first inequality is what you're given without the absolute value symbol. Keyword or. And then the second inequality would be 4x minus 3. How to get the second linear inequality is that you're taking the opposite of your symbol and your number. So the opposite of greater than or equal to is less than or equal to. And the opposite of 5 is negative 5. Now we can solve each linear inequality. Let's add 3 to all sides. So we have 4x is greater than or equal to 8 for the first inequality. And then we have 4x is less than or equal to negative 2 for the second linear inequality. The last step, divide everything by 4. So we have now x is greater than or equal to positive 2, or x is less than or equal to negative 1/2. Now let's graph these two linear inequalities on our number line. So we have negative 1/2 and positive 2. Less than or equal to negative 1/2. Wherever the arrow points, that's where we shade. So, and we need, because it's less than or equal to, we need a bracket at negative 1/2. And the shading is going to the left because our arrow is pointing to the left. Now to graph x greater than or equal to positive 2, because the arrow is pointing to the right, then that's the same direction we'll shade. So we have brackets again, and our shading is going toward the right. Now the keyword "or" means you include everything. So we have to include both intervals in our interval notation answer. So this particular interval is coming from negative infinity, stopping at negative 1/2, brackets. This interval on the right is starting at 2 brackets, and it's going toward positive forever, positive infinity. One note about infinity and negative infinity: you always use parentheses, never brackets, because infinity and negative infinity, they don't have any stopping points. They keep going. Now, to include both intervals in our answer, you must put a U in the middle. U means union, and union means everything. Let's look at another example involving greater than or equal to. The next example, we have absolute value of 8x plus 7 is greater than positive 1. Use the rule that I showed you from the OpenStax book. Our first inequality is what we're given without the absolute value symbol. So we have 8x plus 7 is greater than 1. You must include the keyword "or" because that helps you put your answer in the correct interval notation. The second inequality is opposites. So we have 8x plus 7. The opposite or reciprocal of greater than is less than. And the inverse of 1 is negative 1. Now we can solve each inequality, each linear inequality. The first step is the same for each inequality. Subtract 7 from both sides. First inequality, we have 8x is greater than negative 6. And the second inequality, we have 8x is less than negative 8. You don't have to do it here, but keep in mind, if the number in front of your letter in a linear inequality is negative, and you have to divide both sides by a negative number or multiply both sides by a negative fraction, then you must change the inequality symbol to its opposite sign. But here we don't have to. Just divide everything by 8. So our first inequality is when we reduce our answer, x is greater than -3/4, or x is less than -1. Now let's graph these on our number line and then get our answer in interval notation. So we have -3/4. Actually, -1 should come first. That is important, or else you'll have your interval and your answer will be backwards. So yeah, -1 goes first, and then -3/4. Because we have just strictly greater than or less than, then we'll need parentheses for each number. Now for -1, because the arrow is pointing to the left, then that means our shading is going to the left as well. For -3/4, because the arrow is pointing to the right, then that means the shading goes to the right as well. Our final answer in interval notation, this particular interval to the left is, again, parentheses, -infinity to -1, parentheses. The far right interval is parentheses starting at -3/4. And the shading keeps going forever in a positive direction. So that's positive infinity, parentheses. And because we have the keyword or, we have to include both intervals in our final answer. So to do that, just put a U in the middle, and that will include or union, make both of them together.